Sorry about that, everyone. Had a little bit of technical difficulties, but thrilled to get going. I'm here with Danny Martin and John Davidson, and our panel is on games. And it's all fun and games, creating impact with the 3 billion gamers. So I know both of you have worked together and have known each other for a decently long time. I'd love to hear a little bit about your background and what brought you here, both to SMU+GSV, but also into the gaming industry. So, John, if you'd like to start.
Sure, yeah, thank you for that, Owen. So, give a little background on myself. Seems unrelated, but is actually very deeply related to my work now as a consultant in the esports space. I used to skateboard for a living. So, I got sponsored when I was 14 years old and traveled all over the country skateboarding, still skate to this day. But as far as the gaming and esports space, I served as GameStop's head of partnerships. And my first day on the job, they said, John, we want you to figure out esports for us. I was like, all right, here we go. And so that opened up a lot of doors, really cool opportunity to learn the space from a very unique perspective. During that time, I got recruited onto a number of boards, one of those being the Esports Trade Association, where I was then voted to be president. I'm now board chair. Let's see, I went to Production Resource Group after about 2.5 years at GameStop. PRG, Production Resource Group, is the world's largest entertainment production company. So basically any concert you see, any show, the Super Bowl halftime show, Emmys, Grammys, they own all that equipment and are producing those shows. So they brought me on to lead their global esports business development. And then COVID hit. And then it turns out if you produce all the events in the world and all the events stop, you've got to figure something else out. So during that time, really had my mind open to start my own consulting firm where I help brands and agencies understand how to effectively engage the esports community. I was also recruited by SMU, where Danny did this as well, to write part of the curriculum for the Esports Business Certificate Management Program, if I said that all correctly, and had the opportunity to teach it for the first semester. I think that's about it.
Yeah. No.
Awesome. I'll make it quick, right? I'm approximately in my 12th year in the esports and gaming industry. For me, the light bulb moment, what happened in the University of Texas at San Antonio, I was fixing consoles, and when individuals would bring their consoles to my actual dorm room, it was a great opportunity to talk to them about their best games, whether they like to play, and also cross-market that for individuals who wanted to be able to enter into tournaments that I hosted to make extra capital on campus. So if like you brought me your console and had Street Fighter in it, I'll be like, hey, by the way, I have a Street Fighter tournament that's $100 prize purse. Tell your friends, you know? And at that point, I start recognizing quickly that, you know, you can't just run a tournament by yourself. You have to be able to develop individuals to help you, because you couldn't just go to Monster or Indeed and find someone with 2 years experience in tournament organizing in the esports gaming space. So I would go on campus and just like, hey, you want to run brackets? Or hey, you want to help us market and create flyers? And that's when I knew that this industry needed a lot of development. And I knew you just can't do it physically. So if you can create a technological platform to make it easier to impact individuals, that was going to be the key. But I didn't know coding at that time. But luckily, my professor was like, man, you're dope. I got an opportunity in San Francisco, Silicon Valley. I think this individual who just acquired $14 million really wants to bring you on his company. And so I said, I only got to graduate first. Can you help me graduate early? She said, yes, I got you. And I graduated early, and then I moved to San Francisco and worked with a pretty awesome tech company up there. And he really allowed me to understand everything about building a tech company, from the finance to the marketing to the management to the development and such things. So I knew in my heart I wanted to do esports and gaming. And I also knew that I wasn't a billionaire, so I knew I was going to have to bootstrap. And so I came back to Dallas. Cheaper cost, developers are cheaper, space, real estate is cheaper. So I came back to my hometown, and I knew I grew up in a southern sector of Dallas, which was, you know, it can ultimately be economically challenged. So I knew if I had a skill set, I can actually add that back to my community and impact the individuals in the infancy of this industry. So therefore, individuals that look like me wouldn't be left behind, but they'll be on par, if not even more. And I told myself, this is my mission, to be able to bring more individuals within the actual industry. So currently right now, I own an 8,000 square foot esports studio and education center, 23 to 35 minutes that way, south of Dallas. We use that to bring in educators, superintendents, professional gamers and such. I think right now we've had over 9 gamers turn pro out of our organization. In the last 6 months, 2 of them have amassed around about $1.5 million competing in the NBA 2K League. But most importantly, we utilize our space to showcase individuals that it's not just about gaming. There's other careers within the actual space. When you own a facility, you have to turn the lights on. There's a software that's there. You have to do animations, graphic design, and somebody has to run that event. So ultimately, I look at it as opportunity to teach parents and community members that it's much more than playing the game. There's excitement of playing the game and being the best of the game, but there's even more excitement about getting careers in the space to help the gaming industry grow. Wow. Thank you.
It's phenomenal to hear both of your stories because I think it touches upon a trend that I'd love to hear more about, which is how this industry has evolved. If we were sitting here 10 years ago, I don't know if we'd have a panel on esports or gaming, let alone one on how it can create so much impact and positivity in people's lives. So walk us through a little bit how you've seen this industry evolve and when you realized that this wasn't just a hobby or something that kids do. Gaming can be a massive industry and one that can create value for players, stakeholders, community, and beyond. So if either one of you want to start.
Yeah, I think I had my aha moment shortly after I had joined GameStop and they tasked me with figuring out this strategy. And I remember I was in LA at this conference and I was sitting in this room and it was just the who's who of esports. It was team owners, video game publishers, and every non-endemic brand trying to figure this space out all in the same room. And I don't remember who gave the opening keynote, but I remember vividly what he said. He said, just a caveat on everything said this weekend, none of us have this figured out yet. And I was like, whoa. Like, when in your life do you get the opportunity to be at the ground level of a global competitive industry and take a part in shaping it? And that was 6-7 years ago, I would say. Having the opportunity to really see the space from the retail standpoint, the marketing standpoint, the production standpoint, the association standpoint. What I've noticed is this has been an industry that's been growing for 20 years now. It's just been under the surface. And what brands and agencies have recently discovered, let's say 5-6 years ago, is that every kid is playing video games and they're not watching traditional television, they're not participating in traditional sports in the ways that they used to. So it's really kind of a marketing play of how do we reach these people? And then not understanding how, and understanding this is a group of people who demand more from brands to be in their space. Now, a good part because they haven't been in the past. But then as you look forward, Danny makes a great point. He's got such great experience on all the different facets of the industry that, one thing I think about is, we're on stage here talking about, because we make all of our money working in esports. And probably if you put a controller in our hands, I know I'm not winning.
I'm not either.
You're not either. Okay. But how cool is it, similar to traditional sports, that there's an entire industry here for people to make a living, for young people to make a living in the way that they enjoy most, that pre-5-7 years ago wasn't even there. Now, I will say that there are major challenges right now in the space, specifically sustainable business models and profitability for esports teams. And so there is a narrative, there's a title, Esports Winter.
Yep.
You've heard that?
Yep, I have.
And so what I am trying to push people towards is what follows winter is spring, right? So it may be esports winter. There may be challenges with monetization. There's a lot of mergers, acquisitions happening with companies that are going under. But these business models are going to get figured out. And it's going to be the young people who understand the culture, who understand the act of gaming, who understand their consumer behavior better than older generations do. And once business experience is applied to culture, it's going to be figured out. And I would challenge those who are currently skeptical to say, hey, spend some time in this space, listen, learn, so you're ready to bloom in esports spring.
Yeah, let me break it down. I think when you think about that room that John was in, there was team owners, like some of the biggest billionaires. You have your Jerry Jones, you have your Mark Cuban, you have your Neil Lehman, you have your Ken Hirsch's, you have these awesome big billionaires. They're popular, so they drove a lot of attention to the space. But the industry was not yet developed enough, right? When you think about it, it's great that this attention is here, but if you don't have a pipeline, it's almost like you just have the pros, but you don't have the college ecosystem, the high school ecosystem. So when you're thinking about like the professional scenes, they're able to go into the grassroots. They're able to go to these tournaments and get these recruits, and they don't have to go through any system. They can just hop in someone's DM and say, hey, I'm gonna give you a salary contract. The person is just like, yes, I get to compete with the best of the best pro organization. But that individual that gets on that team, they may not have been developed like Luka from middle school to high school to college. And that individual may have some pretty messed up characteristics as a human, right? So now these actual pro organizations are glorified babysitters versus that of the actual individual being developed. And that's when I recognize the aha moment of when we'll see competitive gamers want to go pro, and you do see that individual go pro, there's a lot of other individuals that want to be like that person. But everyone is not going to go pro into the industry, so you start to think about like how else can you add value? And if you have these pro organizations they may have the best players, but they still are lacking on the individuals who are working behind the scenes, right? They have to have a pipeline to be able to find the best of the best talent outside of the best gamers. And my aha moment came when 3 years ago, there was approximately about 25 colleges that offered esports scholarships. And when those players that want to go pro and you recognize that they can't go pro, you start to say, well, here's a next level college. What colleges are offering esports scholarships? So that's what naturally was for us to think about when we wanted to help individuals get to the next level if they knew they weren't going to go pro. And when you look out and he's like, 25 colleges, that's not that much, right? My aha moment today, right now, 3 years from now, there's over 750 colleges that now offer esports programming scholarships. So for us right now, that shows the development of this industry. And now those pro organizations can not only just go in grassroots, now they can go to those colleges, and now they can see individuals who not only learn how to be good at Fortnite or League of Legends, but they're also getting their studies. They're learning about esports management and marketing and technology and competition and production in esports because they have to, because those colleges are requiring it, because they can't just give a scholarship based off of how good you are in League of Legends. They have to be able to give you a scholarship based off of how well-rounded you are as an individual, which ultimately helps esports winter transition into esports spring.
Yeah, one thing to add to that as well, just to kind of give some context and help everyone understand, is something that's very unique about esports compared to traditional sports is that the industry has grown the opposite of traditional sports. So if you think about how a traditional sports league would typically grow, maybe me and Danny, we start, let's say, pickleball, right? That's the hot new one. Mm-hmm. So we start pickleball here in Dallas. It becomes super popular, and then the greater county, and then the state, and the nation, and then globally. Esports started online, and so you develop this massive online community, starting in Korea, going across Europe, making its way to the United States, and then now it is growing down from global to local. And because it did not typically have that infrastructure of not just local, but scholastic, and then professional, but quite the opposite. That's one of the reasons for all of these challenges. But what's so exciting, especially what Danny's doing and some others, is seeing how scholastic is growing with high school and college and pro. And I know we'll get into that a little more, but I just wanted to provide that context because there's a lot of different reasons why there are these challenges in the industry, but there's also a lot of reasons why we're so optimistic and convinced that esports is absolutely the future of entertainment.
No, that's an awesome thread to draw upon. One of the things that we talk about at GSV a lot is if you want to understand the future, look at young people. So as you mentioned, just the idea of negotiating a contract through DMs versus in traditional sports, there's lawyers, not all players, but most players have an agent. There's a whole process. So I'd love to hear more about what you're seeing from Gen Z, what you're seeing in young people in terms of their interaction with esports, what they want to do in the community, their professional ambitions, and how you see that playing out in the future.
If I had to answer, like I stated, one of my huge passion points is there's a stat out there that's rolling around, and 84% of African Americans identify as gamers, but only 4% of them actually work in the industry of esports and gaming. And I'm one of them. So every day I wake up, I'm looking at it from the fact that how can I get more individuals that look like me? Why? Because my mother and my father growing up, they advocated basketball. I have friends that I grew up with that are in the crowds right now. Basketball, going to the NBA. I knew I wasn't going to NBA, so I looked at the next thing, track. Oh, awesome, I'm gonna go to college and I'm gonna run track because it's gonna help me get a scholarship, or I'm gonna go make a lot of money. And I knew my times weren't good enough to go to the Olympics, so it was like, what's next, And that's when business hit me, right? Because I started to recognize, like, oh, I'm an entrepreneur. I've been doing it in school and such and such. So when I think about that type of hunger that I had coming from the area that I come, I tell myself, I see that same hunger in individuals in this industry, period. They're playing games, not only based off of how they look, but when you think about esports, it doesn't matter about your size or your speed or your creed or color. It's ultimately about you utilizing your brain to maximize the capabilities of a game that's being developed. And I look at it from the perspective of, like, people in our community, they need to be able to know that they can actively obtain the same type of success, and they're not marginalized based off their size, their color, their skin. But there is a fact to this, is that esports, it is a pay-to-play system. Your equipment, your PCs, your Ethernet, all of those could be hard for other individuals to obtain. So when I think about someone who has drive, but they just don't have the resources, I look at it as like, how can I provide the resources for them to be able to scale? Because as soon as you give them the equipment, they already got the drive. They have the hunger to want to be the best of the best no matter what they want to do. I just have to be able to build a facility or provide a tech platform to allow them to be able to thrive, because they may not have those resources. And once they do get those, now hopefully they can actually want to give back to those resources to the next generation. So I see a huge opportunity to inspire, but most importantly, give resources to the next generation. So therefore they can actually see this industry grow.
Yeah, that's very well said. One stat that's really interesting, not even based on demographics, but just based on gamers, this is a couple years old, but when Scholastic esports, high school esports started getting going, and these first teams started being organized, there's a stat came out that 87% of high school kids who are on esports teams had never been part of an organized sport before. And just think about how powerful that is. A lot of times we focus on the negative aspects of esports or gaming, sedentary lifestyle, maybe some content that you don't want young people to view. But the benefits of being on a team are the very same, apart from the physical aspect. Making friends, strategizing, learning to win, learning to lose, all these things. And so think about how many people are gaining these benefits that otherwise without esports never would. The other thing I would say, I think two things come to mind when I think about your original question here with Gen Z, is entrepreneurship and resourcefulness.
Yes.
Gen Z is very entrepreneurial. They have all these resources at their fingertips to be able to do things, right? I just turned 40 years old. When I think about, what access did I have to do the things I wanted to do? You couldn't become a streamer, right? I couldn't throw on YouTube and start recording videos and see if anybody watched, because YouTube didn't exist yet, right? So I think what is so amazing is this is a group of people who, first of all, they recognize there are career opportunities aligned with their passion, right? It's no longer, for better or for worse, to be honest, but it's no longer, I'm going to go work in the salt mines for 25 years and get my gold watch, right? It's no, I have the opportunity to make a living and do what I love. I have an 8-year-old son, and he tells me all this. He wanted to be a paleontologist first. And he's like, Dad, I want to be a video game developer. I want to make my own video game. And he's like, Dad, what's a lot easier than making the video game? It's just playing the game. I want to be a streamer. It's like, Johnny, let me tell you, when you develop the game, you get to play it too. I'm trying to push them towards that. But that's something I see in younger people is that entrepreneurial drive because they have the access to do it. They see other young people doing this, and they see the path forward, and it's so well aligned with their greatest passion that they're running forward, starting at a young age.
No, that's awesome to hear. There's 100 million Twitch users under the age of 35, so the data backs up exactly what you're saying. One thread that I'd be curious to hear more about is your decision, Danny, to build not just an arena and not just an app, but a platform that does both. And I'd be curious to hear why you thought it took more than just a physical place, or why it took more than just building a piece of technology, and your vision to build an end-to-end solution for that.
Wow, that's likely the best question I've ever received. And we talk about this amongst our team all the time, because even our executive team as a CEO and founder, they didn't understand it at the beginning because you only have so many resources. And for us, like we be pushing when it comes down to added impact. So that huge ecosystem of trying to develop that, I still kind of feel kind of crazy, but I understand where we're trying to go because the data backs that up. But for us, we knew if we're in a community, parents, individuals that are in here right now, you may hear someone talk about gaming and esports, but until you come to an actual esports tournament or a league and see it, it will blow your mind when it comes down to it. I have friends that are here that they have seen it. They're like, I never knew this existed, you know? Like, and I've been talking to them for years about it, you know? And that's parents all the time as well. When they come in, they're like, wow. So for us, it's that building allows us to bring in educators. And when we built our facility, we made it to where it was built in a way where it's like a field trip. It's an experience. So when you walk in, as an educator that's career and technical education, you're looking at career pathways. You're looking at AV broadcasting, IT, entrepreneurship, marketing. You're looking at all of those things and figuring out, oh, I don't want my kids just to be able to play, but I want them to be exposed to all of these career pathways. So when we built our facility, we understood that we needed a shoutcaster room, which allows students to commentate on gaming. We knew we needed a production studio to showcase students how to work an ATEM board or that to produce. We knew we needed an arena so we can actually showcase what it's like to support your team and cheer them on. So all of those components were very critical. And then the next question is, from an educator, how do we do this in our school? Yeah. So bringing them there now gives them opportunities to now say, I want this now. And at that point, now you're like, okay, well, I can show you how to do it in the schools. And at that point, then this gives you an opportunity to introduce your tech platform to them. And at this instance, teachers and educators are so used to using Blackboard, Coursera, Canvas. So we looked at it as like, how can we develop a platform that allows us to create courses, but also work with schools in which they can utilize those same courses that we create. And for us, doing that simultaneously was the largest challenge, and also on a very tight budget was, again, the hardest challenge, but we knew that we had to do it because we couldn't just build a platform and expect them to come. We had to show them and guide them through that whole process. So for us, we call it the Pathway to Pro, where we have several different programming up until they get to even see the technology platform. But by that time, the students know what they want to do, the educators know how they want to engage, and it makes it easier for us to drive a student through that whole process.
No, I mean, that's fabulous to hear, and I think, you know, people are seeing the outcomes on a daily basis, so it's an incredible contribution to the community. John, I want to kick it back to you. You mentioned that you were a skateboarder before you started.
Still a skateboarder.
A lifelong skateboarder, but a professional.
Nobody pays me anymore.
But, I mean, when you look at esports and what it takes to develop it out of this esports winter you mentioned, and you see spring around the corner, what lessons have you learned from your experience in skateboarding, either personally, looking at the industry develop, in terms of creating that type of momentum and durable success?
Yeah, I think two things. One thing that I am so thrilled to have found out over the years is just how similar skateboarding and esports is from a variety of standpoints. One of them is the entrepreneurial state of the industry. So in skateboarding, typically what happens is you've got a guy, starts a team. Typically, he's like one of the best skaters in the world. He starts his own brand, and then the best skater on his team branches off and starts his own company. And we see this exact same thing in esports. It's extremely entrepreneurial. So a great example is Optic Gaming, which is based here in Dallas. Started, founder CEO is Hector Rodriguez. Somebody named Nade Shot became a pro in his Call of Duty team, branched off, started 100 Thieves. And I'm sure that somebody on 100 Thieves, Courage, whoever, is going to branch off and start their own org. And so just that entrepreneurial nature and that pathway kind of shows you what's to come a little bit in the industry. The other thing, I work specifically in partnerships. I help businesses and brands and agencies engage the community, but also make strategic relationships and such. And none of these brands understand the mind of the community. They don't understand how to effectively engage the community. And so I came into this space and I was like, I don't know why you guys think this is so hard. And what I realized was, if you think reaching gamers is tough, try reaching skateboarders. And what it really comes down to is the desire to be accepted by the mainstream. And so skateboarders are counterculture. They're like, we don't need you, we don't want you, we're over here doing our own thing. Gamers are subculture, and there's a desire to be accepted and validated by the mainstream in the ways that they have not been historically. And so, and you can stop me if I'm not answering your question here, but essentially, the reason this is so important is that sponsorship revenue is the #1 source of revenue in esports. And we do need to figure out these other monetization models. Media rights is a big difference. You know, in traditional sports, you have these 10-year-long, multi-billion-dollar deals that are just very sustainable, very long-term. You can forecast your revenue, all the things. In esports, that doesn't exist. In fact, you're relying on sponsorship revenue from sponsors who are not receiving an ROI on their sponsorships, which sounds really scary to me from a business perspective. But to understand how to make these sponsorship work and to drive this revenue, it's all about, this is my guiding light, is provide to the community what they desire but cannot attain for themselves, and your brand is embraced. And I'll give a real quick example, if you don't mind, with a current client. I've been working with Six Flags and Coca-Cola recently. And actually last weekend, we just had a massive grand opening in San Antonio that I was able to go to, where we're opening the E6 gaming facility for Six Flags. And the original thought from those companies was, hey, let's build it and they will come, which don't do that. It doesn't work. But so what we did is we said, let's discover the pain points of the industry, and let's find where your brand can uniquely solve those things. And so we started looking through all the aspects of the industry and what could be better, what's missing, and we came to high school and college esports. And what we discovered after talking to a lot of people is the venues for competitions are too big and too expensive for high schools and colleges. A lot of people, they see these headlines of like, oh, this tournament in Poland and there's 100,000 people there and I better build a 20,000 seat arena and everyone's going to come and I'm just going to have trouble, counting my money. And that is not the case in any way. In fact, a lot of these tournaments are extremely small. And what's also small are the budgets for these high schools and colleges. The venue fees are $3,000 to $4,000 a day from these venues and such. Well, it turns out that Six Flags has very small little theaters and venues on site at their parks. And so develop a number of very special relationships with local high schools and colleges to say, hey, why don't you come here and we'll give you a place to practice for free on these very high-end PCs that you would not have access to, provided by Razer, funded by Coca-Cola. Thank you to those brands. And invite them onto the park to practice. And then they also shared, they said, you know what, if we would compete way more if we could afford it. Yeah. And so now we're saying, hey, we don't need those venue fees because there's other forms of monetization that are going to make it profitable for Six Flags and Coke. Why don't you just schedule all your events here and we'll figure that out for you. And so now what you're providing is not only a place to compete where more often than you would otherwise, but also a better experience for families. If anybody has been to an esports event at a a convention center, there's not one thing to do. Dad doesn't know what's going on the screen. He's tired after 15 minutes. Little Johnny's over here, needs to run around or use the bathroom or whatever, and then in between the kid who's playing, what are you going to do? Nothing. Now you have an entire theme park to entertain the entire family. And so what I would just take from that case study is simply, when you go a level deeper beyond the logo slap and what I can get out of this community, and you go to them and you say, hey, what do you need? They'll tell you. And when you discover how your brand sponsorship can uniquely provide meaningful value for the community, you're greatly embraced. And so the reason why I talk all about that is currently the form of monetization in the industry. And we're working on some of these other models, how to drive profitability for teams. But did that answer your question anyway?
Yeah, no, it was a great answer, and congratulations on the partnership with Six Flags. That's awesome. So my second to last question is about emerging technology. And there's an unspoken rule at this conference that every panel has to ask about AI. So I'll have to fit that in. But all jokes aside, if we were doing this 2 years ago, every panel would be talking about the metaverse. Yeah. And when we look at, as you mentioned, there's an esports winner. There was hype about the metaverse, but it's seemingly died down. At GSV, we're still huge believers in the power of immersive worlds, the fact that half of Gen Z lives online, a third of Gen Z's closest friends they met online, and that this is not going anywhere. So I'd love to hear your perspective from the esports industry, the gaming industry, about what do you think about the next evolution of the web? How could that strengthen your industry, and how you see that all playing together?
Yeah, for sure. So I can speak on how it's helping us in our company right now from an esports education perspective. So I just brought up the notion that colleges are looking to adapt programs all across the country, in which our emails are being blasted right now with help us develop courses for that of our programs. And so for us, internally, we've leveraged ChatGPT and other AI programs to actually help us make sure that we can create more robust courses. So currently right now, we're working with that of Region 10, which ultimately supports a lot of the schools, approximately about 800,000 students in the state of Texas. And we've built that of two courses, Intro to Esports and Management in Esports. And right now, the actual courses are being piloted amongst that of educators across Texas. And ultimately, the goal is to allow that of TEA, which is the governing body of education, to accept these courses, to allow educators across the country, across Texas, to leverage the courses for free, right? Where they can get funding to implement these programs in their classes. And for us, we leverage AI to make sure, now granted, as subject matter experts, we can know what is the industry and what's going on in the industry. But when it comes down to pulling more data that's always been very hard to obtain in this industry, with it being such in its infancy stages, we can't even, it's really hard for us to pull data on how many students have actually come through our programs that are now working in the industry or that have gone pro, because the data is just very hard to obtain. That's something that we want. So we look at AIs to help us be able to pull resources that we can't find, so therefore we can make more robust courses. So therefore the educators can be equipped on the knowledge that they need to impact their actual students. So that's how we're using it right now, which ultimately I looked at it as, wow, like this is cool, because it makes you kind of feel a little bit like inept, because you're like, man, why I couldn't find this, which is cool to be able to understand the power of AI.
Yeah, so I would take the question a little bit in a different direction, just the community's response to the metaverse. And I think if you ask just about any gamer, hey, what do you think about the metaverse? They'd say, that sounds like all the video games I've been playing for 20 years. And come on, boomer, like I've been doing this, and so you're giving me a worse version of the immersive world that I like to play in. And so I do think that there's something to it from the standpoint that young people see value in digital experiences and digital products. If you see the amount of money spent, like with Fortnite's a great example. I don't have off the top of my head the exact spend, but the fact that you can spend so much money and it doesn't impact your gameplay in any way, it's purely cosmetic, is shocking to a lot of people, right? And so I would say Definitely right on with digital experiences and digital goods. I think that rather trying to push people to a different platform that is not as good as what they're on, the better step is immerse yourself into the current worlds that they're in. There's great partnerships with Fortnite and other games that are very, very similar to the metaverse. I would also say look at the phygital strategy. So phygital is physical and digital. So how can you combine those worlds as not just in-game goods matched with physical goods, but also in-game experiences matched with physical experiences? One thing I love about the metaverse and like Fortnite concerts and stuff of that nature, Travis Scott was a very viral experience there, is you're expanding experiences beyond the physical footprint. So for example, people who weren't located here in Dallas, you could experience this in a cool, digital, culturally relevant way, right? I think leaning into that is really important, but the other aspect is understanding how impactful physical events are as well, and not overlooking that and just saying, kids are playing video games all the time, let's get online. You know, somebody told me one time, they said, if there was ever a group of people who would not need to get together in person, it'd be gamers, right? Because we are always online, we can communicate and connect with people all over the globe, but when you define passion, probably one of the things that comes to mind is Comic-Con, is E3. If you've ever been in a Counter-Strike event or a League of Legends event or Call of Duty, the energy in the arena rivals a hockey game. And so I would just say, big believer in the metaverse longer term, but rather than trying to pull all these people to some platform they've never been on for an experience that is not as good as the current games they're playing, lean more into what they're currently doing and find ways how to enhance those experiences.
Yeah, 100%. You know, on one hand, Rome wasn't built in a day, but on the other hand, you got to meet people where they are. And one of the things that we look at is with ChatGPT, it's the fastest ever technology adopted. I think most people know that by now. Yeah. What people might not know is the second fastest was Pokemon Go, which was that in 19 days, 100 million users. It's that phygital combination. So we're almost out of time here, but I'd love to hear your quick thoughts on our final question. So one of the things we talk about in our speeches and keynotes is this idea that people can't see things, that they have to see it to believe it. And that if you would have told someone 10 years ago that they'd be wearing AirPods and look cool, they wouldn't believe it. If they would be staying at a stranger's house, it would seem crazy. So looking at, let's say, 2030, what are people going to look back upon today when it comes to gaming and esports that, you know, it turns out that it's going to be way bigger than people expect?
Yes. So currently right now, individuals that are operating in the esports and gaming space, they need to understand that 95% of careers involve learning the software. And so in this instance, when we think about anything in our space and education, in order to align with career and technical education, that's based off of certifications like Adobe Photoshop or Microsoft Office and other certifications. And ultimately, being able to be very good at Adobe Photoshop, that helps you create graphics that you can get employed on. And ultimately, when you think about operating a production, you have to learn OBS or vMix. These softwares helps everything in an esports stadium come alive. And so when you think about it, I feel as if like individuals are going to understand the impact of learning software, in which now you're going to start to see that it's actually a transferable skill for other industries. So now gaming has the capability to impact other industries, because just as much as I told you that colleges are looking at developing programs from a recruitment perspective, they're also looking at being able to have those same programs help other companies recruit from that actual college. So in this instance, being able to understand that these skills are being developed by that of gamers to learn these softwares would ultimately help companies in any industry understand the impact in which it can help them with recruitment. For an example, if you play Fortnite, understanding how to protect yourself in Fortnite is the fundamental elements of building the next Burj Khalifa. If you're an architect or engineering firm, you're looking at those particular skill sets. If you are a surgeon right now, you're leveraging that of a camera and a remote control to take a camera through someone's body, and you're naturally doing that while you're playing a game. If you're a pilot, you're leveraging a yoke to actually fly that plane. You're utilizing that with a keyboard as well as a controller. So individuals are going to start to know right now that the skill sets that they're developing ultimately can help the next industries, and the next industries are going to find ways to be able to engage with the gaming industry because it's going to help their pipeline and help their companies grow every single day. So there's going to be a point right now that's going to happen where individuals say, wow, as a company, I need to start to think about the recruitment elements in the gaming industry. So if I want to be able to increase my actual response and my talent pipeline for the future.
I think about that question in two ways. One is youth esports, the players, and the other is the business. So I'll talk with the youth. I think 5 to 10 years. Yesterday was actually my son's last soccer game for his under-8 team, and it's like, hey, is everybody playing in the fall? Who's playing soccer in the fall? I think we're gonna hear, who's playing Overwatch in the fall? Who's playing Valorant in the fall? I think every single high school is gonna have a team. I think you're gonna see companies like XP League, who have these local youth esports teams, is gonna continually grow and grow and grow, and it's gonna just be very, very common that every single kid is not just playing traditional sports, but is also playing in esports leagues. The other thing is, from an investment perspective, 5 years ago, all this investment flew into esports. And people were like, it's the silver bullet to reach youth. And it turned out it was more complicated than that. I think in 5, 6 years, you're going to see that same level of investment flow in, but you're going to have a lot of learnings, you have better business models, and you're going to have a more successful version of that investment capital flowing into space, and the people who are now in this esports winter taking time to listen and learn and do a little testing are going to be the people who will succeed in that moment.
It's a great note to end it on. So thank you so much to John and Danny for an awesome panel. And
awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
For sure. Awesome.
Thanks so much, guys. Sorry.